There's going to be another Pretty Little Liars spinoff. Plus, we're exploring blockbusters and franchises. Get ready to blast off into the world of entertainment with Pop. Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of Pop Culture Planet. I'm your host, Kristen Maldonado, and this is your weekly destination for in-depth pop culture discussions. Each week, we'll be talking with some incredible experts, breaking down TV and movie news, and so much more. And in this episode, I am thrilled to be joined by Sean Chandler of Sean Chandler Talks About and Griffin Schiller of Film Speak. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm happy you're here.
Thanks. That intro was so good too. It's like so professional. It makes every other live stream I've ever done just absolute garbage. Throw it out the window.
Oh, thank you. It's all written down in my notes.
Yeah. Oh, listen. Well, that's good. You do more prep work than I do, and I admire it.
Well, thank you, sir. Now, typically what we like to do is start off with your origins in the entertainment space. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about how you guys each got started in content creation, where your love of pop culture came from. Sean, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so, I've just always been someone that's been into nerd culture and nerdy stuff. I remember seeing Batman 1989 in the theater, collecting all the cards all throughout the 90s. My sister and I would ride our bikes up to the local comic book shop. It was actually called Sean's Comics. And, she would look around to buy comics to read. I would just look at the pictures because I'm illiterate. And also throughout the 90s, we would go to Star Trek conventions, then go to Comic Cons. They didn't seem to be as big of a deal at the time, at least where I was at. But we went to Star Trek conventions, which are the exact same thing, just only Star Trek. And I just always been that person and started my first movie website back in the late 90s. Got up to like 1,000 views after about 2 years total.
Yes.
990 of those were me, and the other 10 were my mother and my sister, me telling them to watch it or read it, of course. And then I just started my YouTube channel after 20 years of these failures of random blogs and stuff like that in 2016. And I was lucky enough that it took off and was able to go full time about a year and a half ago. And so, yeah, I talk movies, big franchises, and I guess people frequently call me the ranking guy, which is cool.
Yes. Now that we've been in this kind of, pandemic for a little while, do you feel like going full-time on YouTube was the right move and kind of like prepared you to be home during this time?
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways, I just feel just so lucky in the way the universe played out that in this very hard time that I just couldn't imagine what things would be like if I still was delivering paint or if I was somewhere I wasn't at home and my wife was stuck with a full-time job working from home with no backup while the kids can't leave, can't go anywhere, and they have all their energy. And so just feel incredibly blessed the way the universe played out that I can do something I love while having the freedom to be able to, if I need to take a couple days off, to let my wife work for a couple days and I watch the kids. And it really set us up to be able to have a pretty smooth transition with all of this. And even starting next week, we're actually going to start homeschooling, like full-time homeschooling, not even virtual public school, but like actually the real deal. And the reason we have the freedom to do that is because of just the success I've had on YouTube and how lucky I've been with all of this. And so I can just arrange my YouTube schedule around when I need to be able to teach the kids math and teach them piano and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. You're going to have to share your secret on how you keep organized with your YouTube schedule and doing other things.
Which is funny because I, up until about 6 weeks ago, nobody ever would have called me organized. So infamously a disorganized, non-administrative person. And then somewhere in my old age, I've gotten a small amount of organization.
Well, you're inspiring me, yeah. What about you, Griffin? How did you get started?
I just first of all, I started like back in like 2015, just like doing stuff with like a couple of friends. I mean, I feel like, I was watching a bunch of other, film YouTubers and critics and stuff do stuff. And I was like, well, I can probably do this. I have something to say. I find like there was, I don't know, there was like some sort of draw to it that I had. And I was like, well, let's do it. Let's I can get like a couple of my good friends to do it and we'll just have fun with it. And that's originally like how my like journey into the space sort of started. And then it was like, because I was originally going to school for like filmmaking and stuff. Well, not specifically for filmmaking, but that sort of the creation side of it. And then the more I just started doing YouTube and the more I started doing like film commentary and stuff like that, the more I just sort of kind of fell in love with it. And so I just like weirdly fell into this space. And then I was like, well, I guess I'll try and pursue a career doing this. And so I've just sort of I reached out to other publications and have contributed for like, the Playlist, Award Circuit, and other places. And then also like I, started my own website and like just sort of started building up my brand as like the professional sort of like, expert in the space, like in terms of like YouTube goes, like there aren't a whole lot of like journalists that I can per se that have like a YouTube channel. So that's sort of like what I've geared my brand around. And yeah, I mean, I cover basically everything from like, film festival movies to like blockbusters, indie films, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's been kind of like a weird sort of journey. And I'm still learning a lot, but yeah, I just sort of randomly decided, hey, I want to try this out. And then it became my career. So that's weird.
Yep. As for me, I mean, I started my channel totally on a whim. We went on a date night, my wife and I, to go see that new Ghostbusters movie. And it was like, hey, I've got like a dormant YouTube channel I haven't posted anything on in 6 months. Why don't I just threw something up on there? And then it turned into my career. So
yeah.
Life, you never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah,
it's weird.
I think it's so interesting to see, to talk to so many different creators and figure out, find out how did you get started. And a lot of us, I feel like, came from the same place of just like we loved, movies and TV and all these things that are in the pop culture space. And then we were just like, I don't know, let me just put something out there. And then it's kind of becomes this whole thing where now we can all come together and, meet other people that are interested in the same things we are and talk about, all that together, which is awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, I have a question for you, Kristen. How did you get started in this space?
Oh, okay. Well, so when I went to school for musical theater, and towards the end of my college career, I was kind of like, I joined the radio station in my school. I was like, how can I combine my love of talking and performing? And I was like, what if I just like kind of changed to a journalism major and tried to focus on entertainment journalism? And so from there, that was kind of like where I got this idea to like that I wanted to be in entertainment, but I just didn't know like what exactly. So I did a lot of internships and now, my day job, I work at MTV, but I decided that I wanted to, I always wanted to be on camera, like an entertainment reporter. And they always said in panels, like, if you want to do this, you need to like put yourself out there, go out and record yourself. Go, and try to report on something on your own and put your stuff out there. And I was like, okay, let me try that. So I started making like entertainment videos. My videos have kind of shifted over time, but I started making videos about like pop culture. Like my first video was about JoJo getting free from her like terrible music label.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And kind of like more of like the entertainment celebrity kind of space. And then I kind of slowly transitioned, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, I want to be on camera talking about entertainment. Let me just put something out online. I'd never watched anybody doing that. I just was like, this is what they told me I should be doing and, as a journalist if I want to make it. So let me do it.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Then over time you start to meet people and connect with people. And, I started reviewing movies and TV shows and, just making friends in this space like you guys. And I started making the videos, I think in like 2014, I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's been fun, and now here we all are chatting together, talking about where we all started.
That's what's so cool about now, because I'm obviously older than both of you, but there was nothing comparable to any of this when I was in grade school. You could not have called this as your career.
No.
The concept of, hey, I'm going to work for myself talking about pop culture. I'm just going to create content, post it on the internet. People, what are you talking about? You got to dial up internet? What are you going to post it on AOL? What do you mean? There's no concept of it at the point in time. Things have just changed to the point in time where you can build your own audience and you could do all of it just using your camera has a 4K or your phone has a 4K camera in it. And like how crazy that is. And you can stream in high definition from your phone, and it just puts so much freedom in everyone's hand. to, if you're willing to work hard, keep learning, hustle, whether that's just learning the skill set or sending out emails to different publications to get to write for them, you have the ability to do from home. It's been spread out to everyone. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. It's super empowering. It just shows like the impact that the internet has had on like being able to kind of do your own thing and create your own thing, you know? And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious for you, was that like, did your YouTube channel come first and then that's how you got the gig at MTV, or was it the reverse?
No, it was the reverse actually.
Okay.
I was already working at MTV for like a year. And then I started my channel on a whim, and they're very not connected at all. You know, like
right.
MTV, we do a lot of music, we do a lot of promoting TV shows that are on the channel and stuff, or like looking into new musicians. And on my channel, you know, it's more movie and TV reviews and celebrity interview kind of things like that. So it's completely different work. But I do think that like the digital video aspect, I feel like I learn on both sides. Right. You know, and they kind of like help inform each other, which is really cool. And I mean, even just the work there though, like when I first started there, we didn't do social media. Like it was like my team, we were the people that encoded videos, like episodes of TV shows to put online for people to watch. And then slowly they like developed this whole team. And so it's like so weird because I feel like I remember like when social media was beginning for like corporations too, you know, like where like we weren't, you know, people weren't really in there, they didn't really know what was going on, and then it slowly became like this huge asset to these companies. So it's just a very interesting, you know, space to kind of think about that. Like even just 7 years ago, the internet wasn't like where we are right now, you know?
No, yeah. I mean, even this like whole pandemic, it's allowed like so many people to experiment with streaming. Like, I mean, there's like so much of the live streaming equipment out there is like sold out because it's like people just want to like go crazy and like try. It's like, hey, well, I can play video games, or watch me on Twitch, or it's like, hey, I'll start a YouTube channel, and so let's you know, whatever, I'll flip on a camera and talk about this, and I'll do it live. So it's like it's weird, and you're right, like this whole thing sort of becoming more accessible. It creates more competition, but out of all the people doing it, it's like the people who are going to succeed are the people who are like treating it like, you know, legit. You know, they're not just like, you know, toying around and like throwing empty content at the walls. So, yeah, I don't know. It is interesting just that this is an actual space that you can sort of turn into a career. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting for me from the perspective also as a parent of having kids, that they have almost no concept of broadcast television. They have very little experience in their entire life with TV and normal commercials running on it and things like that, and TV playing when someone else pushes play as opposed to when they push play. But they're being raised on YouTube. So there's like this random YouTube channel called Wild Adventure Girls that it's, you know, just some family vlogger with their kids going on these little adventures that my daughter loves. They're just down the road in Dallas. They have 10,000 subscribers. And to my daughter, they are superstars.
Aww.
And that's
wild.
like, and it's, you know, it's literally just some kids in the suburbs that, you know, nothing particularly crazy about their numbers or anything like that. Just a little bit of success with them going to the mall and filming it. And to kids my age, they don't see the difference between that family in the suburbs in Dallas and Dude Perfect, who have 50 million subscribers also in Dallas, versus Dwayne The Rock Johnson. All of them are just people that are on TV to them. So it's just interesting how a whole new generation, they see YouTubers as their stars, but it's this very niche version of fame.
Yeah.
2020.
2020. And yeah, I mean, like you were saying, Griffin, this is kind of sort of like a renaissance of the internet right now in this pandemic, where like everybody's like, you know, going to TikTok, going to, you know, wherever, and starting to, you know, have this resurgence of, you know, people figuring out what they want to make and making content and starting their own thing. So it's going to be an interesting time to look back on in a couple, you know, in several years in history books, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Now, I want to get into some of our TV and movie news. So let's get into it. The first one is, as I'm sure you guys saw, John Boyega has been talking about Star Wars and what his experience was like working on that, and kind of called out Disney for marketing Black characters and characters of color only to ultimately push them to the side. And I don't know if you guys have been, seeing all the news that's been going on about that, and if you have any thoughts, and especially as you guys are big into the franchises, and Star Wars is a huge franchise.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead, Sean. Yeah,
I don't know. There's several things to unpack on this one. First of all, it's just refreshing to have an actor that's like still on the wave of everybody knows who he is, still at that point in time in his career where like he's has every reason in the world to be careful about what he's saying. He just doesn't care. Like he actually says what he's thinking. That's so refreshing when, all the generation of movie stars from my era, like Tom Cruise, you never feel like he's telling you what he's really thinking. Like he's so rehearsed and guarded. And then John Boyega, like, oh man, okay, this is cool that someone is actually being honest. Mm-hmm. Second thought on it, if you read his comments, he talks about, hey, they had a plan for Rey and they had a plan for Kylo, but they didn't have a plan for all the characters of color. I think most people would say that the big problem with the sequels is that they very clearly didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
And I think there's a side to it of you don't always have to attribute something to malice when incompetence is the better explanation. They just screwed up this whole deal because most people look at it and they go, clearly they didn't. They tried one thing, they let Rian Johnson do another, then they overreacted. They're like, oh, this didn't get a good reaction, and then they just made the safest movie possible. And nobody was really happy with what they delivered. They didn't really do justice to any of these characters. It was like, okay, so he gets redemption, of course. And then with Rey, it's like, of course, she's tied to some previous famous person. They have a kiss at the end, but it means nothing. And they can't even commit to the kiss or romance or anything like that. And I imagine where he's coming from is he saw Colin Trevorrow's script, the original version of it, before all the backlash to Last Jedi. And in it, they had Finn as like Spartacus of stormtroopers storming Coruscant. Yeah. And I mean, he's like this epic revolutionary character. And then they went, no, we gotta just resolve this. We gotta play it safe. And then they threw out that script where Finn actually did something super epic. And it just I just read all of it as they were just incompetent and they were just trying to. At last minute course correct, had no plan, and then at the end of the day, nobody's happy, and they accomplished nothing with it.
Yeah, I mean they catered to a vocal minority of racist fans. Basically, I mean honestly, if you want to call it as just like really prejudiced, racist fans that were like upset with stuff, and they were very just the most toxic part of fandom, and that's what they decided to cater to. Like, I understand people may have not liked The Last Jedi, but your response is to take what was given to you and just improve upon it in the next film. I don't know. It does go back to the fact that there was no plan from the get-go. But even more so than that, I agree. I mean, I'm so happy that John Boyega spoke up because it takes balls, just to be frank, to say something like that with, Disney being the corporate overlord that they are. And having control over, all the major or a lot of the major franchises that we see today. And so for him to speak out about that, it speaks volumes about him. I mean, he doesn't care. I feel like the Black Lives Matter rally that he did in Hyde Park, where he was speaking out, I feel like that was sort of like he's always been vocal, but that was really a turning point for him, where he was like, this is bigger than me, getting another check from Disney or whatever. It's like I have to say something about this because it's like everyone knows what happened. So I'm not exposing anything. The cast knows. J.J. Abrams knows. And so again, yeah, I feel like you can fault J.J. Abrams with some of this stuff in actually a good majority of stuff in The Rise of Skywalker and what he did with the characters, him and Chris Terrio. But I think it all comes from the top. It all comes from Bob Iger and his knee-jerk reaction to a toxic fandom and stuff like that. But I do want to go back to kind of what he was saying in the article about the way they marketed the character. Finn in The Force Awakens was marketed heavily as the lead character. He was marketed as he was going to be the next Jedi. They showed the shots with, him in the lightsaber and everything. He was up front in the marketing, even more so than Daisy Ridley. And then, like, people really excited. It's like, oh, we're going to have a person of color be like the next face of Star Wars. Like, this is great. This is fantastic. And then you watch the movie and he's just a side character. Like, he's integral to the plot, and there's still some interesting stuff set up with him. But it's like, if you had seen the marketing prior to Force Awakens, you know, and then you see that movie and you're like, oh, he's not really as big of a deal or as big of a character as we thought he was going to be, which I think is part of the problem here. They use it honestly, in the truest sense, it was tokenism. That's really what they did with this, and they used it to get like diversity points from people. They're like, oh, look what we're doing. But they didn't. They just, it was all show, and there wasn't really substance behind it. So I think that's the infuriating part about it, because had they marketed him appropriately, and you know, his character had done the same thing, I feel like he'd probably be upset with where they took his character in the last film, but he wouldn't be like making these remarks about, you know, Disney using his ethnicity and the fact that he is a person of color, for their own, you know, financial gain or whatnot. Same goes with Kelly Marie Tran too. And so, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to sort of kind of dissect and process with a lot of this, but I'm just really, really happy and thrilled that he's speaking out, because like Sean said, it's refreshing to see an actor do that.
Absolutely. I think you guys make a lot of really great points. And I think now we're starting to see a lot more actors speak out during this time about things that are going wrong or things that shouldn't be happening in projects, which is really important, because then hopefully that means things can change and that they won't, you know, use a character to market things that aren't really happening in the show or happening in the project just to get points.
Well, it even goes back to what we were just talking about, of the power of the 21st century and the internet, to where there is a way, without needing to rely on other media and things being edited, you can just go on Twitter and put thoughts out there that go out to the world. So you have Ray Fisher being like, "This is what happened on the set of Justice League," and you can put it out there. There's no gatekeepers. There's no like Entertainment Weekly or whoever trying to decide like, should we publish this or not. If something happened to you, if you have a thought, you can say it, and people will hear you. And I think it just dramatically changes the way a lot of this works, and breaks down a bunch of the guarded nature of Hollywood, so we can know the truth about a lot of this stuff. That's, when you hear it, it's just frustrating to,
Absolutely. Definitely. Switching gears a little bit to another Star property. Star Trek has been very much kind of bringing inclusive characters to their latest Star Trek project for Star Trek Discovery, and they just announced that they have cast their first non-binary and transgender characters for the franchise. Ian Alexander will play the transgender character Gray, who is eager to fulfill his lifelong dream of being a Trill host, and Blue Del Barrio is a non-binary actor who is going to be portraying a new character named Adria. And I think this is really exciting, because kind of what we were talking about in just terms of like, you know, actually putting your money where your mouth is. Like, these are actual transgender and non-binary actors who are going to be portraying these characters, and just in general, this show has been so inclusive, bringing us, you know, the first LGBTQ couple, bringing us a lot of things that I think we haven't necessarily always seen in these kinds of sci-fi shows. And I was wondering if you guys have any thoughts, especially you, Sean, as you said you were a Star Trek fan back in the day.
I think there's a little bit of frustration, a lot of older Star Trek fans, because the Discovery presents itself as like, we're doing this for the first time, and sometimes like, wait a minute, you did this on Deep Space Nine 25 years ago. And so I think they phrase things in ways that it's like, I mean, there was an episode in season 5 of Next Generation that was very much a trans storyline called the Outcast. There was a whole plot line about a thing called Trills in Deep Space Nine that was an allegory for very much touched on gender identity as well as sexuality. And so I think a lot of it, and for Star Trek fans, feels a little bit like, well, yeah, as fans, we've been fine with this. We've been telling stories like this for a while, and then they say it. It feels a little bit kind of like what we were talking about with Star Wars, of them trying to like say it to get credit for something. It was like, Star Wars has always been progressive. Star Trek has always been progressive. Like Star Trek, all the way back to the 50s, had the first interracial kiss ever on broadcast television, and they were very intentional about like, we're going to have an Asian man on the bridge. We're going to have a Russian in the middle of the Cold War. We have a black woman on the like. They always were doing that. And so there's a little bit side to it of when it feels like they're trying to present themselves as like, now Star Trek is progressive. You're like, no, you're just continuing. You're continuing. But Star Trek's always been like this. So there's a little bit of a frustration amongst Star Trek fans with the way they present it. But it's a continuation of what Star Trek's always stood for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add. Just, I'm not like, I don't follow the shows very much when it comes to Star Trek. I'm very much just like the films. But to what Sean was saying, to what I was originally going to say was that I mean, this is what Star Trek has always been about. Star Trek has always been about pushing the boundaries, making social allegories through like sci-fi and stuff. It's an incredibly progressive show, and I think sometimes when you look at, especially the Abrams films, the new ones, that sort of gets lost.
Right.
And it becomes more of like an action franchise, a sci-fi action franchise, which has honestly never been what Star Trek is. Star Trek is like the thinking man sort of antithesis to Star Wars. So, yeah, so I mean, as for the news itself, that's awesome. That's great. I mean, again, it's a very appropriate show to do something like this. I didn't realize that they had done stuff like this in the past, but I guess that doesn't surprise me, because that's Star Trek. So
yeah, I mean, it's not as like overt, but there's certain ways in which they've always pushed the boundaries of what where culture was at on all of these issues. So this is just a continuation of that, and so it's the frustration with a lot of fans is the producers have said, like, we're going to be like finally Star Trek's going to be progressive. We're like, what are you talking about?
It's all, yeah, that's ridiculous. It's always
that's literally the starting point of Gene Roddenberry's. It was a progressive utopia. That's his whole thing was the Starfleet has moved past all of our pettiness and all the racism and all the sexism and moved past all of that. That's like the core of like what Star Trek is so it's like, well, yeah, of course, this is right. Yeah. We're all on board.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what's really great though is that these characters are, instead of it being like an overarching storyline that comes up later on, it's like they're the main characters as well. So that's awesome. And I know Ian Alexander was in the OA, and I loved his performance in that. That's one of my favorite shows. So I'm excited to see just more people getting opportunities to play different roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's always exciting. And for our last news topic, I don't know if you guys are Pretty Little Liars fans.
Can't say that I am, but my sister was a massive fan of it when it came out, and like I would always like just walk into the room when her and my mom were watching it, and it would always just be like, I have no idea what's going on. This tracks for ABC Family, but I know like so many people love the show, so.
Yeah, I feel like it started off and it was like immediately a hit, and then it kind of went into some places that I think people didn't really like. By the time it ended, it sort of ended in a little bit of a problematic way. But they've already tried to do 2 different spin-offs, and now they're trying to do another reboot. And the other 2 spin-offs were Ravenswood and The Perfectionist, and they were not successful. They lasted like 1 season. They tried to do The Perfectionist last year, did not perform well, but they're trying to do another one. This time it's with Riverdale creator Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa. I do like him a lot. I think that he's done a lot of really great projects like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina I really enjoy. I'm not really a Riverdale fan, And it looks like he has a lot of other interesting projects coming up. So I'm curious to see what they do. But also, I feel like this is a bit unnecessary, especially once you've had 2 spinoffs that already were unsuccessful. But my thought to you guys is, this show ended like 2017. So when is it too soon for a reboot?
Sorry, you said it was 2017?
Yeah, so very recent.
3 years ago, and they want to reboot it, like full start over.
Yeah,
I mean, they haven't said exactly what, but they said they want to reboot it. So
okay.
Yeah, I just it's way too soon. I mean, I don't know. You still have the show there. They tried to do spin-offs, and obviously that didn't work. So it's like it just feels like them trying to like milk the cash cow that is Pretty Little Liars, is because they can't have success doing other stuff set in the same universe. They're like, well, let's just restart it all over again, and that's lazy and that's stupid.
We're going to get into this with where we're going with franchises, but the big problem these days is studio heads wanting to play it safe, and so they're just looking for safe brands. Like, what's the thing that's easiest to get viewers? What's the thing that's easiest to market that has a pre-existing? And I mean, I have no experience with these types of shows when it comes to ABC Family, CW. I only check out their shows if it has grown-ups doing cosplay and punching each other in the face. So like any of these ones, sometimes my wife watches them, so I'll have seen things, but I don't know which ones are which. I had to look up to see if this was the one that had Blake Lively in it. It did not have Blake Lively in it. I was like,
that was Gossip Girl.
Yes, like, my brain, they're just like, I have no idea how similar or different they are, but my brain just squeezes them together. That's how little knowledge I have of them. But it just seems like the sort of thing that they're just trying to milk a brand. And they've done that sort of thing with 90210, Melrose Place, and everything else too. That they just making safe bets. But it just feels like, shouldn't you let this rest a little bit? Like what is different now from 3 years ago when you felt like you needed to end it, or even how much has things shifted in 10 years? Like what new angle do you have that would justify this? That's the thing that is, of course, always the question.
Yeah.
And it feels much more like, well, we know we have a brand, so hey guys, can you pitch ideas to me of how to make this fresh and new, as opposed to actually doing something with creative and artistic merit?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think like what shows have done it successfully, and I can't really think of many besides maybe Roswell, New Mexico, where it's the same characters as Roswell, but like it's a completely different setting and story, and they've aged them up, and like some of the characters' names are different, and like it really feels separated. But like,
there's a 15-year gap, wasn't there? Maybe more than that. It's like, I get it when there's a 15-year gap, but like 3 years. Yeah. What are you doing?
Yeah, especially if it already hasn't been successful the last spinoffs. What are you going to do now that's going to be different? Yeah,
that's this. Like, it just seems weird. Of like, I don't understand. Isn't one of the definitions of insanity doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result? Like, this experiment has not worked. Like, where we go? Why are you trying it over and over again?
Well, that's the same thing when it comes to like some of the comic book reboots or some of the I'm trying to think of ones that come to mind, but like, I don't know, some of the X-Men stuff. Obviously with oh gosh, why am I blanking on what? Anyways, but there's like, you see, going off what Sean said, you see it in like massive tentpole franchise making.
Terminator. Terminator. I mean, one of my favorite franchises of all time.
Terminator.
That Salvation underperformed, Genesis way underperformed and was hated. So they're like, let's immediately turn this around and put out another one that, I mean, they just burned out the audience on this franchise where you're like, when can you even do another Terminator movie now after like how much you've burned credibility with the audience? And I really enjoyed Dark Fate, but so many people were just so burned by the time it came out that it didn't matter that it was better than the stuff they've been putting out. James Cameron was involved, Lynn Hamilton showed up. All the reasons that it probably should have been one that people liked, they were just tired of the franchise because they just kept going back to it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit.
We'll start switching gears, but I do want to also mention something that I've thought about is just like some of the Marvel characters, for instance, where they do so many iterations. Sometimes it is, I think, because not even just because they have a story, but because they want to keep the characters. No. So then it becomes not.
And
even
we literally
like
know
about
that
the story. Yeah,
it's not even a secret. It's like we literally know they have to make a movie by a date, and therefore they do.
Yeah. So it's like, if you have an idea, that's great. But if you don't have an idea, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
But let's just switch gears into our main topic, which is franchises and blockbusters. I feel like we already kind of started getting into that territory. But just to like set some basic ground here, what do you guys think kind of make the element of a good blockbuster or a good franchise? What do you like need?
Oh man. I mean, I feel like more often than not, I would say that it comes down to the characters. It's like, do you enjoy spending X amount of films with them? And are they progressing with each installment, or is it just a retread of the first one? So it's like really compelling and interesting characters, an innovative and original kind of concept that appeals to the masses, I think is a big one, and kind of like transports you to another world, and such. And then sure-handed direction, which I think kind of comes hand in hand with the concept more often than not. The directors or the guys like sort of like coming up with these ideas for the first time, unless it's like, based off of pre-existing material, which is another route that you can go on. But if we're talking like original stuff like Indiana Jones or Star Wars or whatever, like those are all original ideas from the creators, and they are the people who also directed the projects. And so I feel like the direction is a big sort of standout, and it can hinder a great idea from it can make a great idea not so great in execution. We've seen that done time and time again. Some of the Wachowskis stuff that they've done in the latter half of their career, or even honestly even The Matrix, like that should have been an incredible franchise with 3 solid installments. The only good one is the first one because they botched the execution and in the sequels. And so, yeah, I would say director, the idea, and the characters are definitely like the 3 most important things for me when it comes to franchises.
Now, my question to you is, if The Matrix was so successful, but the other ones weren't, what was the missing thread there? If it's the same directors, is it the story that's missing? Is it that they just couldn't... the direction just didn't live up to the other films? Like,
I think inherently, so where I was going to go with some of this is that you need to create a world where you want to see more stories, but you have to have a story that easily can build sequels off of it. You can easily tell a second story. So you look at The Matrix, the movie ends with Neo going into God mode. He's unstoppable. And so the only thing you can do with that is you have to deconstruct God. Like you have to neuter him. And so you get the second movie in the first half, you're tracking along with it, and they're like, okay, we have to find a way so that Neo isn't able to just destroy every room of villains that he's like. They literally, the first 30 minutes of the second film is them like, Neo is just demolishing guys wherever he goes. And then 1,000 Agent Smiths attack him, and he just lays the smack down and flies off. And so where do you go from there? Well, you have to find a way to undo everything that you did, in which case everyone's like, I loved what you did with the first movie. Why did you just deconstruct it? Why did you just tell me that all the cool mythology doesn't matter? And so I think they wrote themselves into a corner if you wanted a franchise.
Yeah.
The things that was able to make the first one so good hindered the potential of the sequels.
And that's the other thing, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the writing is key when it comes to franchise, because we have seen so many like franchises that have had like one really solid installment write themselves in the corner because they blew all their great ideas in the first film, and then they wrapped it up in a way where it's like, how could you possibly continue this? And so, yeah, I think that writing honestly might be one of the most important aspects to solid franchise filmmaking. Sprinkling ideas here, sprinkling ideas there, and then like plotting out a course for where you want it to go. But yeah.
And so, like, one of the big franchises that isn't quite a franchise yet, but will be a massive franchise a decade from now, is Avatar. And the reason that people are so confused by it is that the original film does not set up a franchise. It's a very self-contained story about this guy's transformation. It's the joke is that it's Pocahontas, Dances with Wolves, Last Samurai, Ferngully. It's this template that doesn't lend. You don't get to the end of Avatar and you think, oh man, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And there's movies where you watch it, and even if you're frustrated by them, you go, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. I don't want to say too much about the movie Tenet, but you get to the end of it and you go, oh, I could see them being way more stories here. There's more things that can be done here. Even though it's not necessarily even trying to set up a franchise, you could see how they could. You get to the end of Avatar and you go, this feels complete. What do you mean you're going to do 4 more of these? Like, you just have no concept of what 4 more stories is in the world of Avatar and what Jake's going to do. And that's it. That's what makes it difficult for people to get excited for it. Well, at least me. It's tough for me to get excited for him, even though I love James Cameron.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I'm glad you brought up the Tenet thing, because that's the other route that you can go with franchises, is sort of like the James Bond model, where it's like each film is like a separate adventure that doesn't really tie into the previous. It's the Indiana Jones model.
I guess it's more about that character that's become so iconic that you want to see them do more things.
Yeah, right. Again, that's going right back to the most important thing, which I think still, even with all of the talk of like writing and stuff like that, it is the characters. Because, you know, if you wrap up the first one in a really neat and tidy way, then maybe you have an opportunity to turn it into sort of like, I guess, an anthology sort of series where each adventure is different, but the character is progressing. And so I feel like you can either go that route or you can go the plot route, where it's like just an entire story covering like the covering X amount of films.
Yeah, it's tough because like, you have to have a character in a scenario that lends itself to this plausibly happening again. So you think, what's another iconic franchise, at least from my era, Die Hard. The inherent scenario of the original Die Hard it's not a great foundation for a franchise, because the whole premise is like, he's just a normal cop that happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he's forced into this scenario. That's what makes him interesting. And so when you create the scenario where it's like, of course it also happens to him every couple of years. Like, man, once again, he's at an airport. It's been taken over. Oh no, the U.S. has been taken. Only he can do it. He's in Russia to get his son, and only he can say. And it just keeps straining plausibility built into the premise of the original. Every time you say it happens again, you cheapen it to the level to where they're like, hey, now we're going to do a prequel. They've been saying this. We're going to do a prequel called McClane, and we're going to find out his origin story. It's like, you've forgotten what you forgot what made the character interesting. There was no origin story. That's the original is the origin story, because he's not supposed to be a super cop. He's just an average cop. He's not even a good husband. He's a bad husband. And so he just like, this is the thing where he tries to be the best version of himself. That's the whole premise. And so that's where you have to have like a setup that lends itself to further adventures. Or you have to find that angle that makes sense for how do you keep going. So like John Wick is one to where you watch the first movie and it doesn't immediately lend itself to a sequel. The character can go off and shoot more people in the face, but the plot of the first movie doesn't immediately set up like, all right, who are they going to kill in the next movie? You think like, what are they going to do with this? But what they smartly did is they built out a world that had a really rich mythology to it, which that's unique to that genre. Most of these movies don't have a deep mythology. And so they went, we're not going to kill off his new girlfriend or his cat that he picked up. We're going to double down on the mythology and his backstory. And so they were able to build a franchise out of it. And you went, this works. This makes sense. And so it's finding the thing inside of your movie that you can build off of.
Yeah.
Now we have a comment here from Aaron Plays, who says, what do you guys think about the Halloween franchise and how they made their sequels? Do you think any of them are necessary? I think this is an interesting one because Halloween is sort of one of those ones that feels like it continues, but also it has this like slasher quality that's like very like kind of, you can put that on a lot of different types of movies. So it's kind of unique that Halloween became so iconic. So what do you guys think?
I mean, Halloween has reset the timeline multiple. They keep resetting it.
Yeah.
So it's an example of an iconic franchise where they keep wanting to tell more stories, but they wrote they've killed off Jamie Lee Curtis specifically 2 separate times. One of them off screen, and I guess this is actually spoilers to say all this, but like one of them is off screen, and then they retconned her back in for H2O, and then without wanting to say too much, that there's like they brought her back again, and they kept resetting the timeline, retconning things. So then when they brought it back for Halloween, what is it, 2018, they went back to the original film and they just ignored everything. They even ignored Halloween 2, and all like she's in 3 movies that they ignored entirely. Just went back to the original one, and it's weird the way that franchises can sometimes do that and get away with it.
Yeah,
and the fan base will kind of forgive that, even though that's offensive. Like if you've been a fan of Halloween since the 80s, watching these movies, and they just went, all of this gone,
we're
going to go back. We're going to start over.
Well, I feel like that in that particular franchise, it's a case of the sequels were just so bad and convoluted that they literally had no choice. Like Halloween is an example of failed franchise filmmaking because they didn't really know where they wanted the story to go. I mean, originally Halloween was supposed to just be an anthology series, which is why Season of the Witch is so weird, because like that theoretically, I mean, that technically should have been the direct sequel to Halloween. It's like each sort of film is like a different sort of horror installment, but it has the name Halloween under it. So yeah, that one, that particular franchise, I feel like they understood that, listen, we have just destroyed this franchise, all the goodwill that it possibly had. We even tried to reboot it with Rob Zombie, and it got even worse somehow. So they, like with 2018, they're like, just scrap it all. We'll just do a proper sequel to the original one, and actually try to make it good. So going forward now with the next 2 films that they're going to do, I feel like that if both of the next films turn out to be good, then I think that's an example of the creative forces involved in the franchise understanding their mistakes and then just like doing what I assume the fans would want, and that is like actually continuing the story from the first one in a good way. I mean, they tried to do it with Terminator, with Dark Fate, and that wasn't good. So I don't know. I feel like so I'm sorry. I shouldn't. Yeah, I guess I don't know. For me, it was
people are all over on that one. I get why people are burned on the franchise. I think if you can ignore all the movies that were burned, the goodwill, I think it does a lot of interesting things. But at the same, I do understand why a lot of people don't like it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like the franchises that like, they try. Some of them try to do the reboot and it succeeds, and then some of them, or not the reboot, but like the long-awaited sequel to that first one, and it succeeds, and then some of them don't, and it's like maybe at that point just retire the franchise. Honestly,
yeah, it makes me think as like a person who just loves television. Like when you have like 7, 11 seasons of a show, and it's like, okay, maybe we've run out of ideas. Like, do you guys feel like that happens with franchises?
Yeah,
Where it's just maybe we gotta take a break.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I think it's sometimes they just get into these weird ruts. So as long as we're talking Terminator and reasons that people are frustrated, it like after Terminator 2, that movie's success broke the franchise. The original one is a slasher film. It's low budget. It's about a robot that's just killing people. It's going through the phone book, killing everyone in alphabetical order with the name Sarah Connor. And so it's a slasher film with sci-fi, time travel, action elements to it. And then he followed it up with this blockbuster that's beloved. And it made a bukus of money based on $1991. And so then they just went, okay, now we have to copy Terminator 2. And they forgot where it started. And so then they're all road trip movies with a good Terminator and a bad Terminator and the robot learning about humanity. Like, yeah, but we already did that. So you're competing against yourself. You have to do something new with this. And then they kept trying to like make it for a broad audience. Like, let's do it PG-13. Let's do this. And they just lost what made it special in the first place. They stopped taking risks and they just played it safe, which is, once like, The Dark Fate is a road trip movie about a Terminator gaining its humanity and stuff like that. And so once it made the same mistake that even though I said I liked it, but it just burned so many people out because they're doing the same thing with it. And they get these ruts and they don't know how to get out of it. And they think we have to keep upping the ante.
Now, do you think this is because with these kind of like blockbuster franchise sort of films that, it's more about the money than anything else, and it's just like, let's get out a movie and we're running out of ideas, but we need another movie because we know that this franchise is a name? Or what do you guys think?
I think that's a big part of it, especially with the Terminator. That's what it just entirely feels like. That it's not like they don't care about story. They know if we make a great movie that people love, it'll make more money. And that's it. Would we rather have a good movie that people love, or like obviously they want to tell a good story, so they tried to get James Cameron back, and they tried to bring David Goyer worked on The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, and Man of Steel, and they got the director of Deadpool, so they got like a team for it that of course would. They're trying to do that, or you can pick whatever franchise. We're just using the Terminator example, but at the same time, they give them these parameters of like we just have to keep. It just the mid-tier, mid-budget movies seem to have gone away, and everything they want to make it a $200 million, all chips on the table. We're going all in, and therefore they make the safest bets. Everything is big and massive, and therefore, what's the version of that we know how to market? And the podcast I used to listen to all the time, it's called Script Notes. It's with John August, who's done a lot of work with Tim Burton. He wrote Aladdin from last year. And then Craig Mazin, who his claim to fame for a long time was that he wrote Hangover 2 and 3, and then he did Chernobyl a year or two.
Oh, wow. Very different films.
A little bit of a transition. So for a long time, Craig Mazin was like kind of the joke in the cookies, like, there was a little bit of like, why are you telling us about screenwriting? You wrote The Hangover 2, and so people would pick on him, and they would constantly talk about like, I'm a hired screenwriter, like they hired me to write a specific movie. I wrote the movie they told me to write, and so then he gets this other project, Chernobyl, and he wins all these awards, and so suddenly everybody respects Craig Mazin all of a sudden. But so I listened to like 100, 200 episodes of this, and they talk about. These guys have been working in the industry for 20 years, and how the industry has changed over that time to where scripts just written from scratch by screenwriters, those just aren't getting purchased anymore. Mm-hmm. And marketing departments are largely part of the decision-making process of like, do we know how to market this? And if you come in with something that you can say, it's this plus this, they know how to market that to people. So it's a lot of existing properties, book adaptations, sequels, reboots, remakes.
Yeah, everything's an adaptation or a reboot or a remake in some way, shape, or form.
Especially in, like John Campia on his channel frequently says, if you actually look at all the movies that are made, if you look at the 700 movies that are made, it's actually a very, very small percentage that are sequels, reboots, and adaptations. Like, right. But the ones that are getting money. The ones that are getting $100 million plus to be made and getting marketed like crazy, all of those sequels, reboots, adaptations, and Christopher Nolan movies. That's it.
Yeah.
It's only Nolan is getting able to do that stuff anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, one more thought. I'm talking too long. Well, no. And then people complain on Twitter all the time, like, does Hollywood run out of ideas? What's wrong with all these screenwriters? It's not the screenwriters. They have a bazillion ideas. It's just not getting greenlit. The stuff that you're hearing about, it's all from the executives only greenlighting pre-existing properties that they know how to market.
Yeah, I mean that's why something like Tenet is like so special, because like and like Nolan had to make those 3 Batman movies in order to be where to build the credibility to where he is now, and those 3 Batman movies not only got like massive box office success and like basically reshaped Batman for the next generation, but like they were prestige pictures too in a way, especially The Dark Knight. And it's funny, going back to the Terminator thing, maybe this is a tangent or not, but like going back to the Terminator thing where it was like T2 was almost too good that it forgot where it came from. The Dark Knight is almost too good to the point where people think that The Dark Knight Rises is like bad when in actuality it has more in common with Batman Begins than it really does The Dark Knight. So it's like sometimes you'll get franchises where there's that like that big one that really just breaks through and it's like, oh my gosh, it's considered a classic or whatever, that the ones that sort of like pad it are overshadowed, and then they get like they don't get as good of a critical reception, which I just think is interesting. But yeah, I mean, again, that's one of the reasons why Christopher Nolan is one of the greatest talents working today. Not only because of the quality of his films, but because he is basically single-handedly keeping the original blockbuster alive. There is no, like, Steven Spielberg can't even get money to do what he's doing right now. So it's crazy.
And it's a weird example on that. Literally, as I was coming upstairs to do this stream right beforehand, had a mini argument with the wife because I was like trying to plan for like, hey, when can we go see Tenet? And she's like, after what you said about it, I'm not all that interested to go see it in the theater. I was like, no, no, that is not what I'm no, do not use me as the reason you're not seeing. This is now, we have to go see it now. If you're going to try and use me. This is an original blockbuster. You have to please support it.
Yeah.
I gave it a positive review. I said, please don't take what I said to me. Don't see this movie. That's the opposite of what I meant. I just can't give it an A just because I want people to go see it. But of course you should go see it. It just has some flaws too. But please, 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 please don't take the fact that I had criticism of it to mean I don't want you to go see it, because I want the message to go to Hollywood. Make original blockbusters.
Yes.
Give people like Nolan the freedom to make movies like this. Stop telling screenwriters that we only want your script if it's an adaptation of something.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and the last thing I'll say about this is that I wonder if after Matt Reeves does his Batman movies, if he'll be at a similar level where he'll be able to get the financing to do original films. It just seems like if you if you do a comic book character and they become like prestige and box office success, if they have both, then you basically are granted keys to the kingdom. And it's like Matt Reeves could be in the position to be the next Christopher Nolan, even though they're very different filmmakers.
Yeah,
but
well, I think some of it is that Nolan, whether he just for whatever reason he got Inception. Yeah, I think Inception is the thing that, because that movie worked, it was the 1-2 punch. Like, okay, man, we're going to let you make this wacky dream movie. I don't know, but here you go, Christopher. And then it worked. And it was like he just made a beloved comic book movie, and then he made a beloved Inception, original. Yeah. And then he goes back and do Dark Knight Rises that, nowadays, we pick, like, I'd pick on it a little bit. I'd still give it a positive review, but it made more money than The Dark Knight. Like it made a ton of money. And so that's 3 movies in a row that just cranked in money. And one of them was a fully original. And I think that's the thing that Matt Reeves, I think, needs to find the way to do is like, do one of those Nolan grinds to every other year you're doing one, or do one for them, one for you, and that's the way Nolan did it. Because all these other guys, they get stuck in the rut, and Joss Whedon after the first Avengers is like, man, he can do whatever he wants. What has Joss Whedon done in the last 8 years? Justice League reshoots. He wasted his opportunity at the top of the world, and Nolan didn't.
Yeah. That's true. I think the only thing that Matt Reeves has going for him is, like, after the Batman movies, he'll have done the critically acclaimed Apes movies, which maybe weren't the biggest box office successes. The Batman movies, which are like, if they're looking as good as that trailer, I'm assuming it's going to be critical and commercial success. So yeah, you're right. He would need that original, like, sort of blockbuster idea. I don't know, maybe another like Cloverfield kind of idea, because that was original, and people forget that he did that film. So I don't know. But
he also wrote the script for Under Siege 2: Dark Territory, an underrated classic from the mid-90s starring Katherine Heigl.
Well, there you have it.
I've seen that movie a lot.
Too funny. Now, we've talked about a lot of like big blockbuster franchises, but there are surprisingly a lot of like under the radar franchises that I've recently come to discover that I'm like, who knew that there were 6 Bring It On movies? Or who knew that there were how many American Pie movies are there going to be? There's a new one coming out, you know? And so I'm curious, what do you guys think about some of these movies that, you know, like Bring It On? I don't know if you necessarily, you know, the first movie was a huge success, and then all the other ones are straight to DVD. You know, the Cinderella Story with Hilary Duff, that movie was a huge success, and then all the other ones are straight to DVD. Why do you think that they continue to make movies like that and continue these sorts of franchises that are not these huge blockbusters? Because I'm just like, there's been a Bring It On movie every 2 years since the original one came out. I had no idea.
It's interesting because I'll look at some of these and I'll be like, who is watching Bring It On 6? Who is watching American Pie, Beta Band Camp 7, or whatever names they are for these spinoffs that are just so far removed? And then at the same time, opening weekend for Deep Blue Sea 2 and Deep Blue Sea 3, Chandler household had them rented and we watched them. So that's the weird thing, is you have these weird franchises where you're like, bad shark movie? Absolutely, we're going to watch Deep Blue Sea 2. And we did. The second one, absolutely dreadful. Third one, not as dreadful. Pretty surprising. It's I mean, it's not a good movie, but like for the schlock that we were going for, when I was watching, I was thinking to myself, like, am I just going crazy right now? Am I just in a good mood? Or like, is this kind of enjoyable? And we got to the end. My wife was like, oh, that was way better than the second one. I was like, okay. I'm not crazy. This one delivered the direct-to-video schlock that I wanted. And that's what's interesting is that, or another one I saw, Sniper 6. There's this franchise from the early 90s with like Tom Berenger, of all actors, called Sniper. And there's there's 6 of them. Like I'm going on Vudu and I'm just always surfing on there, like what new things are coming out. It's like Sniper 6. Wait, Sniper 6? And they put one out every 3 years for the last 25 years or whatever. And like I think Tom Berenger's son is in it now, so it's like his actual son is replacing it. And
so
what a legacy.
Yeah, right.
Sniper wasn't a hit in the 90s. It's not like that was this big movie that went somewhere, but they somehow made a direct-to-video franchise out of it, so someone keeps watching these things.
I think that's the thing. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that's the thing. I feel like the ones that keep getting like these like straight to DVD sequels, they're the cult hits. They're the ones where it's like, yeah, we probably can't release this in theaters because we're not gonna make a lot of money. But if we put it on VOD or we put it on like physical media, straight to DVD or whatever, we are guaranteed this audience will show up and watch it. It's like why there's like so many Sharknado movies too. Like there's like a hardcore fan base for that, and they'll just watch whatever the heck it is, like Sharknado versus Sharktopus or what. Like I don't know, like all that stuff. So it's just like I mean it's just the cult factor that I feel like adds to the success, because like to the Deep Blue Sea thing, people love that first movie. Like that is like it's probably outside of Jaws one of the better shark movies, although I'm not as big of a fan of it, but like, you know, it does have that following.
How dare you? Can you kick him out of the stream real quick?
Listen,
and remove.
Yes.
All right,
yes!
We're just doing this by ourselves now. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's okay. I probably deserve that. I every time I say that on my channel, I get like at least 3 comments that are like, "How dare you? Deep Blue Sea is the second greatest shark movie of all time," and I'm like,
the second greatest. Well, I should kick myself out because I've never seen it. Goodbye.
What? Basically. So, in the realm of shark movies, you of course has Jaws as actually a great movie, and then from there it just turns into the schlock.
Well, there's no like
features.
Isn't Jaws like the only good shark movie, and then all the others like it's not much competition to be the second best shark movie?
Yeah, I mean,
how many shark movies are there?
They turn into just like these ridiculous, they're creature feature movies with sharks.
Yeah.
In which case, Deep Blue Sea was one directed by Rennie Harlan with Samuel L. Jackson and LL Cool J and Thomas Jane. So it actually had a budget and stuff like that. Yeah. And then, you know, same reason that The Meg is like, well, it's the third best shark movie of all time. Why? Because John Turteltaub directed it. It had a $50 million budget, and Jason Statham. Like, I mean, like, and then from there, where do you drop down to? Now
Finding Nemo.
There we go.
Let's just clear something here. The Shallows is the second best shark movie because it's actually a good movie. The one with Blake Lively. Like that's legitimately a good movie, I think. Like, come on.
Fun fact, I haven't seen that one yet. My wife has seen it because she always picks like an actress that she doesn't know is one of her favorites, but like I figured out before she does. But then it's like anytime a Blake Lively movie comes out, she's like, I should go check that out. And she doesn't know that it's like, is it's a, like, so she's like, I'm gonna go see the new Blake Lively movie. I was like, you're gonna okay. And then I figured it out when was it Simple Favor came out a couple years back, and Anna Kendrick in it, and then it like became like her favorite movie of all time, just because it had both Anna Kendrick, who is one of her favorites, and Blake Lively.
Whoa, double whammy.
But,
yeah,
and then Golden thrown into the mix. I mean, just all sorts of things to make it perfect for her. And then what was that other thought on there? Oh, yeah, and then Rhythm Section this year. She actually wanted to go see this action movie just because it had Blake Lively. But, I haven't seen The Shallows yet, but that guy's directing Black Adam. So
the guy who did the Rhythm Section?
No, Shallows. I combined like 5 conversations there. 5 thoughts. The Shallows. I went Ballas. Shallows guy.
I was like, the guy who does the Rhythm Section should not be directing Black Adam. That is no. But
yeah, so the guy that did The Shallows, he did like 3 of these Liam Neeson thrillers.
Yeah.
So if you went based off The Commuter, you'd probably also be like, that bright guy probably shouldn't be doing Black Adam. But for whatever reason, he did 3 of those Liam Neeson movies that I love.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a weird rabbit trail.
Now, I guess we'll start wrapping up this section. But for our viewers over here, do you guys feel like there are some franchises or blockbusters that you feel are like the best, the worst, the underrated, maybe certain franchises that you think do a good job of continuing on?
Mission Impossible. You're in movie 6 and it's like, yeah, this is the best one, and the 5th one was the best one, and the 4th one was the best one, and the 3rd one was the best one. 2nd one wasn't the best one. But like you look at Mission Impossible, that's one that just, what a hot streak.
Well, they just figured out like how to, they tweaked their formula, and then it was like, oh, now we can make good movies. Because it was like, I don't think the 3rd one really did that all that well. Like I liked it, but like it wasn't until Ghost Protocol that the franchise sort of started turning around. So it might be Mission Impossible 6, but it took like 4 films to get to like the good quality that we're at right now, and finding the right creatives involved. So yeah, but just in terms of like best or like favorites, I mean, I don't know. Like, listen, the James Bond franchise is like my favorite franchise, and like not all of the movies are good, but I love the fact that like with each actor that sort of takes on the role, it's basically like starting from square one again. We kind of get a new taste. They can go on new adventures. They can establish the tone for their era. And it's also like the longest running franchise outside of Godzilla. So like that's also really cool. There's like a long history where you can go back and like see movies from the 60s and like figure out how espionage was during that time. And so I think that franchise, one of the reasons why I really like it is because they're great time capsules of the periods in which they come out in. So that's probably my favorite. And then someone in the chat actually mentioned that I agree with is Planet of the Apes. I think Planet of the Apes is pretty underrated, just as a franchise in general. Not all the films are good, but like more of them are good, I think, than bad, if I'm not mistaken.
Going off of what you're saying about James Bond, what do you guys think about franchises that have different actors playing the same role versus having a franchise that continues to bring the same people back? Sort of like how in each James Bond, there's different guys that
Bond. I like it because I think it gives you it keeps the franchise fresh. Instead of the same interpretation of the character over and over again, you have a different actor who, the character is still written, as James Bond, but that actor can bring a new flavor to it and, explore a different side of him. I mean, with this Craig era that we're currently like in and wrapping up, it's been a more personal and emotional sort of journey for the character. We've really gotten to explore the psyche of him that we haven't seen before. And then, Roger Moore is a little more campy and comedic. Sean Connery is obviously just like the hardened kind of stoic, brutish guy who can throw the one-liners. He's got confidence out the ass. So it's like, and so it's like each person brings their own interpretation, and then with that, you sort of build a movie around how they're interpreting the character. And truthfully, that's what Indiana Jones should be doing. Harrison Ford should have ended at Last Crusade, and they should have had like a lot more movies with different actors as that lead character. But they can't quite figure out what to do with that franchise, which is really, really disappointing.
I think it also kind of depends on the type of the franchise where, with Indiana Jones, with James Bond, they're inherently mostly episodic. We're going off on a different adventure, so it's easy to swap someone out and not be distracted by that. Whereas, even Batman Begins to The Dark Knight, switching out Rachel, you're like, okay, Katie Holmes and Gyllenhaal have very different vibes that they bring to the Rachel character. And so certain ones you notice it a lot more when there's a swap, even if they're a side character. And for me, like with Rhodey in Iron Man 1 to Rhodey in Iron Man 2 with Don Cheadle and Terrence Howard, like that's always bugged me because I liked what Terrence Howard did so much more than what Don Cheadle has done. And he's a great actor, but
I guess there's something to like, if it's like a James Bond where like each movie or each era can have a different person. If you switch out someone within that era, it's weird. Like if you're in the middle of the Batman, new the Batman, and you switch out someone, that's gonna be weird. But if you're gonna have a completely different cast, like Batman Begins to the Batman, it's like, okay,
the most obvious example in the modern era would be Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo. It's difficult to feel like Incredible Hulk is part of the MCU because Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo do not feel the same on screen. They do not bring the same energy. They do not play the character the same. And so though technically that is the backstory for Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner Hulk, it feels like it's something totally different. It feels might as well just be Eric Bana or whatever because they're just such different vibes. So it very much depends. Whereas, you don't go into GoldenEye being like, this guy's so different from Timothy Dalton. What happened between License to Kill and this movie? Like, no, it's just we're on a new Bond adventure and it's different, but that's fine. Whereas as opposed to when there's tight continuity, it feels weird.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, is there a franchise that's coming up, or is there anything coming up that you can see becoming a franchise in the future that you're like excited for?
I mean, it's probably just because I just saw this film that it's the first thing that came to mind. But if they made a sequel to Tenet, I would love it. Like, I feel like that has franchise potential, at least like a trilogy of films. But I don't know. I like highly doubt they would ever do it. But it'd be kind of cool to see like what would happen if they did decide to do that.
It's tough to say because, as per what we've talked about before, all the stuff we know about, all the things that get promoted, get the marketing that we discuss are adaptations. So, the Batman, that could be a great franchise. That's a stupid answer. Obviously, a Batman could make for a great franchise. Yeah. That's the one I'm excited for, but that's also to say that what did they recruit the A-list talent and give him $200 million and 4 years to make a movie for, where they gave it to a Batman, an obvious franchise builder. And so then it's tough to know even what's on the radar that could be an upcoming franchise because they're just small things. Or you could maybe Dune will be a great franchise. Mm-hmm. Well, Dune is already a franchise. It's based off of a book already, and we've had previous versions of it. Right. So it just makes it so tough because everything that gets the big bucks is an adaptation. And everything we hear about, everything that I talk about on my channel, it's tied to franchise. Some of it's just my channel, but a lot of that, it's just because they're not giving a lot of these writers and directors the freedom to create their own franchises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think someone in the chat mentioned Pirates, and I think Pirates has the opportunity to kind of evolve because I think many people are in agreement with this. I think that the Pirates movies with Jack Sparrow should have ended at the third film, and they should have gone on and told they should have gone on and told a different story, maybe a different trilogy of films with a different lead, different characters, but set in the same pirate universe. And I think that one specifically, like, it's such a wide open, realm of possibility. You can tell so many different pirate stories that don't have to pertain to Jack Sparrow. So that's why, like, what they're doing with Margot Robbie is perfect. What they're doing with Karen Gillan is also, like, that's the right move to make. So long as they, like, do a different, they don't really try to connect to those original pirate films. I feel like just go off, tell a great pirate adventure film, and then we'll see what happens. The other one that should be franchise making material, but probably won't be because I feel like they're just gonna watch it, is Uncharted. And granted, it's already franchised because it's based off of the video games, but if we're talking film adaptations, like, that has the potential to be like the interim Indiana Jones, or the replacement Indiana Jones, or the modern, like, whatever. Like, it just, the games are basically an Indiana Jones adventure, so it's like the movies should be that. And I feel like the direction they're going in is just not going to give us that, and so they're probably going to botch it, unfortunately.
Speaking of Karen Gillan, I will say one franchise that I've really loved lately was the Jumanji one, which I think was unique in that, it was a movie from a long time ago that everybody loved, a classic, and I was very skeptical about how they were going to adapt it. And I think it's been successful. I love both of the new movies, and I feel like they kind of teased a third one that looks like they could come back out into the real world, which I would watch it. I would go watch it, and I would enjoy it.
Yeah, that was interesting, because it did kind of have a revival, similar to Mission Impossible. Like, they made a sequel where it's like, okay, we did something completely different, and I think we sort of, like, found a rhythm here. Unfortunately, at least for myself, I didn't like the next level, because I thought it was just basically a retread of the first one. And then it's like, well, I don't really know where they can go from here, other than, I guess, bring Jumanji to the real world. But then I don't know. I don't know if I'd like that as much. So, but I do agree with you. If they can figure out a way to do it right, that's another great franchise out there.
So let's start wrapping things up. If anybody has any questions or comments, we're going to go back through and answer a bunch of them. But if you want to add any others, you can do that now. But I wanted to see if you guys had any other closing thoughts, and we'll wrap up the podcast and then get into some of the questions from the viewers. So any closing thoughts on franchises and blockbusters?
I just to title back to what I said before, the frustration is that studio heads are not allowing creative screenwriters and directors to create new franchises. We're not getting the new Star Wars and the new Indiana Jones, where in the late 70s, they were like, hey, George, sure, adventurer in the 1930s battling Nazis, go do it. And that's where this new thing came from. Star Wars at one point in time was this wacky, crazy idea that George Lucas just came up with. And even back in the 90s, they just allowed Griffin's favorite director, Roland Emmerich, to make this Independence Day movie. And they gave him, enormous amounts of money to blow up monuments. And they allowed them to do this. And then now they're not doing that anymore. And that's, I think, they're at a certain point, like we're at that point in time where they're not doing new things, so they're just cycling through this stuff, and they're just recycling through it, and we're confused by it. Like, why are we remaking this? Why are we remaking that? And you just have intellectual inbreeding. It doesn't work.
And then in 20 years, what are we going to remake?
Yeah, 20 years, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And then
we don't have anything original.
We didn't even touch on this one, like Disney live action remakes. The thing that one new one comes out tomorrow, to where, like, Disney, how do you not see that this is not sustainable? You're literally just like, you're pulling from what was so successful when I was growing up and using that for now. But what are you going to do 5 years from now? What are you going to do 10 years from now when you've already burned through every pre-existing thing that you can remake? Yeah. Why would you do that right now specifically, where you already have the MCU just pulling in insane amounts of money, and you already have Star Wars pulling in billions of dollars? Why would right now you choose to crank out such a dangerously large amount of these things to where you just run out of ideas? And I think you already see that of like, what are they going to do next?
Well, aren't they, correct me if I'm wrong, going to do an Aladdin 2?
Yeah, I heard they were like thinking about a sequel or something like that.
But then it's like I already know that there was like sequels to Aladdin and like Mulan and stuff, the animated version that I never even saw, that didn't do well. So I don't know. I feel like especially with these live action movies that haven't been performing super well, or I'm sure they've been performing well, but like are not getting they're getting like kind of mixed reviews. It's like why would we make another one? Are people going to actually come back and watch that?
And they already did this game with Alice Through the Looking Glass. The first one made over $1 billion, and the second one made like half as much.
Yeah.
Maybe even less than half as much. To where people went, oh, the novelty, Alice in Wonderland, Tim Burton, crazy, wacky visuals. And they went, I'm not crazy about this. And then they did not come back for Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah.
Disney's going to be in trouble soon.
I mean,
I think they're already kind of in trouble a little bit. That even if they'd taken this exact strategy and just stretched it out over several years and taken risks on new things, like just think how many not just blockbusters, insane blockbusters they had last year, but they were all safe bets, and they could have taken a risk in there.
Yeah.
The amount of money Endgame made could fund multiple big risks.
Yeah.
To let Brad Bird, Andrew Stanton, some one of these guys just run with a wacky idea and try and do something new. And they did not do that. And they're not going to have the revenue that they had in 2019 for a long time.
Yeah. I agree. I don't I mean that's basically what they should be doing. They should be using the money from Star Wars and Marvel to fuel original projects, and like, some will be a hit, some might not be, but at least, give it a shot or whatever. I mean, John Carter should have been a good franchise. Like that should have turned into multiple films, but like they didn't know how to market it. They legitimately didn't know what to do with the property, and so it just kind of came out and people were like, what the hell is John Carter? And it didn't do well. So unfortunately, it's like even when they do put out these original ideas, they have no idea how to market them, and so like they've got many issues. Other than the fact, it's like it starts with the fact that they're not doing original ideas, but then it's like, okay, we'll do a few of them, and then you botch them because you don't know how to market them to the masses. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to wrap us up now, and we'll start getting into some of the questions here because I feel like there's a lot, and we're going to dive into some other franchises there. So really quickly, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. You'll be able to find all the information and links to Pop Culture Planet and our guests below. But if you want to follow Sean and Griffin, do you guys want to share where they can find you? Sean, do you want to start?
Yeah, you can find me on the YouTube. If you look up Sean Chandler, you will either find an NFL player or a guy that looks like me and is talking about movies. It's the guy that looks like me and is talking about movies. I'm on the Twitter at Kirk Never Died and the Instagram at Sean Talks About. I didn't do that smart thing where people have the same handle on everything. I tried to make it extra confusing.
Yes, we love it. All right, what about you, Griffin?
Yeah, you can find me over on the Film Speak channel. I just, a couple days ago put out my kind of analysis on Tenet, have a couple of interviews coming up there, so definitely check out what we have going on there. Then also you can follow me on Twitter at Griff Schiller.
Awesome. And if you're interested in following the podcast, you can follow me pretty much everywhere at Kmaldo or the show at Pop Culture Planet Podcast on Instagram to find out what guests we're going to have on each week. You can also catch new episodes of the show every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. EST. And if you watch the live video version of Pop Culture Planet on my channel like you're doing right now, youtube.com/Kmaldo, you'll be able to join in on the conversation in real time and stick around at the end for the Q&A that's not in the audio podcast. Episodes are available on all of your favorite listening platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. And if you enjoyed the episodes, consider subscribing so you know when there's a new one posted. Rate and review this podcast and share it with your fellow pop culture lovers. Thanks for listening. It's been a blast, and I'll talk to you next week. All right, let's get into the questions that we have here. We got a lot of good ones, I feel like. So I'm gonna go all the way back, but I'm gonna try to keep it quick also because I know we've already been talking for a while. So let me go back a little bit more. We have a comment from Salty Pineapple talking about the new news that Robert Pattinson just tested positive for COVID and the filming for Batman has shut down. Have you guys heard about this?
Yeah, I did. That's it's unfortunate. But the other unfortunate thing is like, you know, a virus doesn't really pick and choose. It just sort of happens. And so it's like we have no, you know, he may have just like briefly walked past someone and that's how he got it. He may have like been ordering coffee and that's how he got it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but I hope he's okay, and I hope he's able to recover. And actually not only him, but The Rock yesterday. The Rock, his family all have it. So it just goes to show that, you know, a disease does not pick and choose. It'll affect anyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We got a comment from James. Maybe a supernatural stalker. I think this was in reference to the upcoming Pretty Little Liars reboot. You know, I think with having Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa taking over, the fact that they've done so many supernatural things on Riverdale and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I can see them maybe deciding to do a Pretty Little Liars supernatural twist. Let's see what else. Kieran says, let's reboot Twilight into a TV series. Would you guys watch that?
No.
That's pretty safe to say no on that one.
You know, I'll totally watch it. I'd watch it.
Yeah, Twilight. I just trying to think, how do you even expand that into a TV series, and where do you go with that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I guess you could dive into the whole vampire mythology
and the werewolf mythology.
I guess there is a lot of stuff to go into that. Maybe you've convinced me that I would actually appreciate this. That this love story about a high school girl dating a 100-year-old man that's also not a human.
Didn't they do that? The Vampire Diaries? That's like every vampire story. Too funny. James also says Katie Keene should have been renewed. Also agree. So Sean says, what does the Terminator need for fans to fall in love with the franchise again?
Time and I think it just needs to take a break because there's franchise fatigue. And so I think if they hadn't done Dark Fate and they brought it back in 2024, 40th anniversary, Lee Winnell does a hard reboot, and it's a return to the original style of the original. Budget's under $50 million. So it doesn't need to make $1 billion. It doesn't need to make $500 million to be profitable. But you get someone like Lee Winnell has a great style. You watch his stuff. He's already exploring, an upgrade, technology and stuff like that. And he does a return to the slasher film with sci-fi, with action. People would have eaten that up. And it doesn't need to be a blockbuster. That's what I think you need to do is stop trying to make a movie for everybody and make it for like real cinema fans. So, and that's what they see Terminator. They go, but what if we had the success of T2 again? What if we could do that again? No. Stop that. Try and make a great Terminator movie that is true to the original one. And I think if you did that, and maybe it's not Lee Winnell, it's a different kind of up-and-coming, smart director with a style to it. I think that's what you got to do.
Yeah, I agree. Because I honestly have no idea what they could possibly do. I feel like they've lost me personally. Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever want to see another one, but if they could, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
I think so much of that is that they just did too many of these that didn't connect with people, and Dark Fate was their chance to win people back, and instead of winning people back, they lost them forever.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's what I just proposed that you can't do that anymore. Yeah. If they said, "Hey guys, we're going to do another Terminator movie in 2024, and it's going to be a remake of the original," and I was like, "Who cares? Like you've burned us constantly for over 25 years,
straight into the ground." They've run it right into the ground. They can't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe in like 20.
They haven't burned me though. I'm still on board. I'm for this one. But there's not many people like me that aren't burned by this franchise. I even like Genesis. I mean, it's bad, but I still enjoy it. It's my junk food.
So in regards to when we were talking about like what do you need to make a good blockbuster franchise, Kieran says I would have to say casting and writing are the biggest parts for them.
Yeah.
And James says they need to plan a story before making something a franchise. Writing as you go is a big yikes for me. It's why Pretty Little Liars failed by season 7.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you have to have like a plan or at least an idea. Even if you're like, I feel like even if you know you're just making the one film, but you leave a little like nugget of like in the future, that can kind of maybe leave an opening. But sometimes I feel like films don't do that, but then they try to make something out of nothing.
So Nolan infamously or famously, whichever direction you want to go with it, he says he did not have any thoughts in mind for a sequel to Batman Begins, and he had no thoughts in mind for a sequel to The Dark Knight. That he threw everything he had into each one of those movies, and he didn't even start thinking of, like, there is this little tease at the end of Batman Begins where like there's a Joker card, like this guy is showing up, upping the ante, that turned into be the basis for The Dark Knight. But he says like we did, and David Goyer has confirmed this, like, yeah, we did not have a conversation about a sequel until Batman Begins was leaving the theater. It had been out for months. And then at that point in time, Nolan called me up and he said, hey man, maybe we should do lunch and we'll sit down and let's start talking about what we could do with this. But it was like he was not planning on doing a sequel to Batman Begins until he had a thought about it, which was months later.
Yeah. So
that's weird. Like, it's normally a bad sign. You can watch the Star Wars sequels and they are confirmation that you should have a plan and stick to it. And then you look at Nolan, but I guess the difference there also is that Nolan, there was one voice. So sometimes it can, but
I think the other difference is also Batman is already a franchise that has so much world built already, so that even if he didn't have an idea, there's so much he could pull from and other characters in the Batman world that you could bring into the picture. Whereas for some other projects, like, you don't have anything else. Like, it's just whatever you came up with. Like, at least you have the rich world of like the DC universe.
Yeah. And to some of what we said before, you can do it's episodic. Like, there are of course threads that go from one to the other, but with Star Wars, it's designed to be like whatever happens with Rey and whatever's teased with Finn, it has to be paid off in the next movie. You need a plan for that. You have to have some idea where you're going. Of course, then again, there's also all sorts of stories that the original drafts of Empire Strikes Back did not have the Vader twist in them. It wasn't until about the third draft where there's actually pictures of George Lucas's notes to where he just wrote in the margins of one of the drafts of it, Vader is Luke's father. And it came later on. And so even as much as we set all these rules, this is what you got to do, there's always that example that breaks all of it. That's the classic story that makes it so tricky. But
that's true. And wasn't it Back to the Future where they like added the scene at the very end where they're like, we're going back, but like that actually wasn't in the original movies. And after the success of the first one, they were like, oh, we got to do more. So then they added that scene where they're like, we got to go back to the future.
So the scene was always there, but they've said that they actually shot them. They didn't plan on doing a sequel. They just thought, what would be a fun way to end the movie? Was like, what if he came back from the future? But it wasn't on their mind at all to do a sequel. And so then Back to the Future turns out to be this insane hit. And then the problem they ran into is we didn't know what to do with Jennifer because
so they've
said that openly, like, why in the second one did we have to knock her out? It's because we didn't know what to do because of the nature of the dynamic that worked so well in the first movie. How do you just add this person in that just discovered time travel happened? They have no time to acclimate to it. And so the actual specific adventure that they have in the future is a little bit wacky because they didn't know what to do because they didn't actually have a sequel in mind when they shot that scene.
Oh, you know what I was thinking of? The To Be Continued. They added to the VHSs. They added to the VHSs, but it wasn't in the actual movie.
Yeah.
Or
with Star Wars, they didn't originally say Episode 4. That when Empire Strikes Back came out, it said Episode 5, and people were like, "What just happened? What just happened here?" And I think it was like the re-release in like 2 years after Star Wars came out. They might have had Episode 4 on it in the re-releases of Star Wars, but the original versions did not have Episode 4 on it.
Yeah.
All these wacky little pieces of trivia history, pop culture history.
Pop culture history. Sean Holmes says, I don't think it's possible to reboot a franchise like The Terminator without repeating what people have already seen.
Yeah.
And Alb says, Sean, I saw your ranking for all Nolan films today, and I was surprised to see Tenet that low. Just goes to show how many good films he's made.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's that. It's always interesting to me what surprises people, but it's because I created all my content, and therefore I was there when it was filmed, edited, and then posted, and then had the conversation in the comment section. But so, like, I've gone through all the reviewed all of Nolan's movies over the last 3 months, and so I put my thoughts out there. To me, my ranking's not surprising. It already exists out there.
Based on what you already reviewed.
I've already done this, and then I have a previous ranking, so you have an idea of where some. I missed a couple of movies because of the timeline, but so when people are like, "I was really surprised you had Tenet so low," I was like, "Really? Did you watch my review of it?" Like, pretty clearly, I had frustrations with the movie. So if you thought it was like top 5 Nolan film for me, then you didn't watch my review that I posted out, or my spoiler review, or anything that I've said about it on the internet. But
Yeah.
it's always interesting to me.
Yeah. We got a comment from Colin. He's been listening to this entire episode while making a quesadilla. It's been a fun time.
It's probably the best way to watch this particular piece of content.
Yeah.
While
I agree.
making a quesadilla.
Yes.
There's a lot of things we can disagree on. Not that.
quesadillas.
Not that one. I kind of want one now, if I'm being honest. I'm really hungry.
I'm actually kind of mad that he didn't make one for each of us. I don't know how that would work, but I'm counting on him to create that time inversion technology, in which case he would be able to show up for each one of us with a quesadilla.
Yeah, I'm waiting on
But
that
he didn't.
too. Yeah.
maybe in a couple years.
Yeah.
But if time inversion works, he's already done it in a couple years. Therefore, that's why the fact that he doesn't have stuff
Where
for us,
did this
he doesn't care about it.
Yeah.
What? We got another question from Kieran. Says, good point about Avatar, Sean. Really curious to see how many people will be interested since the story wrapped up and it's been so many years. Yeah, it's been a long time.
And it's not something that became part of the cultural zeitgeist, or however you want to say that. I use the word zeitgeist just to make you guys know that I'm smart. But it's not one of those movies that really caught hold with the fandom. You don't see anybody painted blue for Halloween. Mm-hmm. You know, I know that they're the Na'vi. His name is Jake, but how many people know that? What's Zoe Saldana's character's name in it?
Yeah, I don't. Honestly,
I don't remember.
And then is Quaritch. Quaritch is the villain. But do you know do we know anybody else's names? Like, it's just not one of those movies that caught hold of that just has these iconic characters. It's a movie
that it made a lot of money. And
it made a lot of money. It was like a moment. It was a moment in time that we all saw it, but you didn't go home and rewatch it. It didn't capture, and so we're not looking forward. Like, man, I just can't wait to see what happens next with Jake.
You know, maybe if they had done it within a few years, but now it's been so many years. Like, I don't really know.
And then at the same time, it's tough to write off James Cameron. If you're talking about a guy who's got a good track record with sequels, Aliens, T2, all right, he knows how to do sequels. And then the last 2 movies that he wrote and directed became long-standing, the highest grossing movie of all time, and it took the Marvel Cinematic Universe to topple him. So you can't write off James Cameron, but of all things for him to choose, why this? Why this? Makes me depressed.
Kieran says he trusts Cameron with this, especially because he personally insisted on the fact that he had to make 5 films instead of 4, and he loves the world and he's looking forward to discovering the whole story.
I just don't want to see it. I just James Cameron should be doing a million other original ideas. Like he's just been stuck in Avatar land for like the past since 2009. It's been 20 years. Yeah.
But it's not 2009 because he spent 10 years making Avatar, so it's 20 years.
I don't. It's like and you can't like the last movie he made that wasn't Avatar was The Abyss, correct?
No, Titanic. Abyss was 89.
Oh, that was 89. Okay, yeah. Well, so it was Titanic. So he hasn't even made a film that wasn't Avatar this century.
Right.
Like,
that's crazy. Like in Griffin, like right in your because before Titanic it was 1994. So in your lifetime, he's only made 2 movies.
Yeah.
That's insane. It's crazy.
I know. It's absolutely nuts. And someone who's like an innovator, like one of the greatest, like, you know, filmmakers at all, whatever. And he's just done like from 2000 onward, he's just done Avatar. And I'm just
the majority, a large chunk of my fan base is, you know, teenagers.
Yeah.
In their lifetimes, he's made one movie. And so some people that were big Avatar fans are like, Cameron I trust. Okay, right. I mean, I'm as big of a fan as anyone. That's why this is such a disappointment. The opportunity costs, what it cost for us to get 5 Avatar films meant that he took 30 years off from making other movies. All the potential other things that he could have made. People are like, oh, do you just want him to do another Alien movie or another Terminator movie? No, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. He's the guy that did create the Na'vi in Avatar, if you love that. He's the guy that invented the Terminator franchise. Yeah. And he's the guy that did Titanic, which won a ton of Oscars. And he's the guy that did True Lies, which was a fantastic action movie. And he's the guy that did do a sequel to Alien that was Aliens that I think is better than Alien. He did all of those things. And then for the way it's going to play out, 30 years of his prime Avatar movies.
Yeah.
I hope that they live up to it.
Like, and if they don't, oh boy.
Oof.
Yeah. And then people are like, he's got the rest of his life to do that. Rest of his life, it'd be 75. You think he's going to become prolific at 75? That's when he's going to stop overthinking things at 75? Yeah. No, we lost our opportunity to have a prolific James Cameron.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had some thoughts on that.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about any of that. Great points. Very good points. Yeah. We have a comment from Rhapsody Productions. It says, big fan of all 3 of you guys. I just started a movie channel for fun, getting over the awkwardness and shyness. You've all inspired me to keep going, excited for the future. Well, good luck with your channel.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, that's awesome. Alp says, do you think they should make more Creed movies? If so, what direction do you think they should go in?
I think they should wait a little bit, and then it gives an opportunity. The thing that the Rocky Creed franchise has, the thing that's given its longevity is that it's seeing these characters in different phases of life. And when they did these back-to-back, they, of course, created legendary films like Rocky IV, but it's not the 80s anymore. You can't do that with the Creed franchise. You can't have him ending the Cold War by battling a genetically engineered Russian and dancing with a robot. And so then what can you do that the Rocky franchise has been successful at is you can see a character at a different phase of life. And anybody that wants Clubber Lang's son to show up, they're fundamentally misunderstanding why they could bring a Drago back. Clubber Lang has nothing to do with Creed. There's like they disagreed with each other in a mat. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So don't do that. But you take a few years and you can have an aging Adonis who's 40, and there's potentially something there of what does he have one more fight in him. These themes that are all throughout the Rocky franchise, but it's all about, do they have one more story? Stallone has said he's out. He if he does Rocky again, it's going to be a Rocky movie. If he does it, but he's not going to be in the Creed movies. The Creed need to stand on their own. So if they have a story, I'm game for it, but I think you need to take some time, and I'm glad that they're not like, let's just crank out another one, because I don't think that would work. I think you go into silly zone when you do that. And they've already played out the rise to the top, the fall, and the return. For sports franchises, that's the big meat of it. So you have to have a break, have the character in a new place to be able to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, would I like to see more? Yeah, sure, I'd be down. But again, I don't want them to kind of tamper with what's already there. Just because, like, the 2 Creed movies we have are so good. I mean, if the story is right, then sure.
Cool. We got another comment from Sean Holmes who says, why did the RoboCop reboot fail? Do you guys have any thoughts?
So I rewatched it a couple months back because I did a ranking of the RoboCop movies, and for me, the big thing is that is a movie that it just felt like nobody wanted it, because the original was directed by Paul Verhoeven, and he has such a distinct style. A dark, like his movies have a dark satire to them. They're ultra violent. They're like spicy food of cinema. I mean, it's really distinct. Like a lot of people watching me, like, this is so violent. This is so dark. Oh, this is not for me. But the people that like RoboCop, talking about intellectual pre-existing properties that built an audience, they like the spicy food that is Paul Verhoeven. And then they announced they're doing a remake, and it's PG-13. So people are immediately like, wait, you're taking all the spice out of my spicy food. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. And if you watch it, the first hour of the movie, I think that they did have interesting new directions to take it to it, because part of the world is the kind of dehumanization is built into it, of like this corporate world that doesn't care about people anymore. And they found ways to explore that in new ways in the remake. And then as soon as he becomes RoboCop, the movie just feels like it was edited by producers, and it felt like they took a 2.5 hour movie and trimmed 45 minutes out of it, and it just felt reconstructed in the editing room, and it just had no flavor to it. Mm-hmm. But I think there were some ideas that were interesting in it, but that's my quick take on it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like, I can't really give you too much insight into the RoboCop franchise, just because I don't really know much about it, other than I saw the first one and I liked it. But going off of what Sean said, I feel like that's probably right. Like Paul Verhoeven is the draw. Like that's why people wanted to see those movies, and the fact that it was R-rated and actually like had some interesting commentary with it. I feel like that's sort of why that movie succeeded, and then they just tried to make a PG-13 action movie using the RoboCop name. And so that's why I don't think it worked.
Yeah, when you do things like that, when you have the whole point of doing RoboCop is there's a built-in audience.
Yeah.
And if you don't, and you're trying to like, how do we market to this group of people? But then you make a movie that's for everyone. That's like, immediately you go, what are you guys doing? Are you trying to make it for RoboCop fans, hence why you're doing RoboCop, or are you trying to make a 21st century blockbuster? And they couldn't decide. And that's what a lot of these ones, they can't decide. Aren't like, why on earth are you using this pre-existing property if you're not making a movie for the audience? Mm-hmm. The pre-existing audience, this pre-existing brand. That just seems what a lot of these are, of like, all right, we know there's a built-in audience, but we're going to immediately step on their feet. We're immediately going to create a product that's not for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think's going to happen?
Marketing 101.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What's our demographic?
Yeah. Right.
Audience?
Yeah. And that's so many of these, it just feels like so many reboots from the last 10 years and remakes and everything. They just missed that whole concept of, if you're going to make it for that audience, make it for that audience. Understand who they are and what is the extension. What's the 21st century version of it? But like, understand them, and they just don't.
Yeah.
And it's hard to even blame the filmmakers, because it felt like the filmmaker seemed to have a concept of what was at the core of RoboCop, but then the constraints of it's a PG-13 movie and all of that, just you'd be like, who was this for? And same with the Total Recall one. I think even more so. It's another Paul Verhoeven remake, and the movie's known for all this weird, wacky stuff and mutants on Mars and a woman with 3 boobs, and like that's what everyone talks about, like all this crazy weird stuff. And they took all the weird out of it, and so it's just a slick 21st century PG-13 blockbuster. And you go, who is this for? Yeah. And people loved it because it was ultra violent and weird, and you made a totally vanilla sci-fi movie that it doesn't even have the ideas in it. Like part of the fun of the original one was it had all these crazy ideas of, is this real, is it not? And that's the fantasy of it, the bonkersness. And then slicked.
I think there is something to, especially when you're making these big franchise blockbuster type of films, where sometimes it might not even necessarily be the director or the writer or the cast. It's like there's all these other higher up people that are making these decisions of like, you can't do that. Oh, no, we don't want to do this. Oh, we want this type of movie. Oh, we need to cut this out because we're trying to appeal to everybody, not just, and so then it kind of like, when you really think about it, there's so many aspects that go into making one film that sometimes it's like, where did it really go wrong?
Right.
Was it the director? Was it the writing? Or was it something completely that we don't even see that's like so high up on the food chain?
Yeah. And that's when they're trying to make everything a blockbuster. Everything is supposed to be make 500 million, $1 billion. And they just miss that what made these things work in the first place is that they weren't that. And what made them work in the year 1990 doesn't work anymore.
Oh, it's 1990 to 2020, very different times, you know?
I mean, you look at what was like a cool action movie, the stuff I grew up on, that's just not what is cool anymore. So one of the reasons the Terminator franchise just doesn't work. That was amazing in the year 1991. And it feels dated now. It feels like a product from a different time. That is not what big blockbusters are today. And they keep trying to turn it into that.
Let's go on to a couple more questions. I feel like there's actually a good amount here, so I'll try to go through them a little faster so that we can get to as many people as we can without keeping you guys. So I'm going to combine these two. So do you think the next Mission Impossible movies are going to continue being better than the previous one? Because I know you guys were saying you liked those. And also, do you think that when Tom Cruise is done, they're going to try to keep the franchise going?
They can't. The problem with the Mission Impossible movies and the corner they've painted themselves into is that Ethan Hunt isn't a character. He's a Tom Cruise vehicle. Yeah. And when they try and give information about his backstory, it's just not really all that interesting, or it's just like super generic. So I think when Tom Cruise is done with Mission Impossible, they stop making movies and maybe reboot the franchise or whatever. But it won't have the same power that those mission films with Tom Cruise has. As for the am I excited? Do I think like the next Mission Impossible movies are going to be bigger and better? I don't know if they're going to be better. I think they'll probably be bigger because that seems to be the thing with them. I don't know. Fallout was like really exceptional. So like to me, like even if they come close to that, I think we'll have good movies. Will it top that? Who knows? But I don't know. I'm just looking forward to seeing them. They're always fun. They're always a fun time.
Yeah. To what Griffin said, they're on a hot streak. It's very unlikely that they're going to make a bad movie. Will they top what they've done in the last few? I don't know that they'll top it, but they don't need to. I just don't. People think like, I don't think it'll make a better movie. Well, if they just made a movie that everybody loved and thinks one of the best of the genre, that's just a great practical action movie with real stunts, with spy stuff, you don't need to top that. No. You just need to make a worthy sequel that doesn't hurt the mythology. Do I think they'll do that? Yeah. I'll throw this in there, though. I was disappointed that McQuarrie was coming back. Not because that I think he'll do a bad job, but that I think both because he's on a hot streak, I want to see what else he can do elsewhere, not just doing 4 of these movies in a row. Mm-hmm. And also because one of the things that's the strength of the franchise is that they've changed people out. And that's one of the things that's kept it fresh. And so the fact that we're going to get to a point in time where 4 in a row are coming from the same guy, I think that violates a little bit of what made me interested in the franchise at the beginning.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that I'll be their opening day pumped and excited. I just would have preferred that they didn't go in this direction.
Yeah.
Totally. We got another comment from Colin saying the John Wick franchise is a great example of fantastic execution. Self-contained first movie, but enough there to lead to sequels and better ideas, great world building, and interesting characters. Aaron Plays says, does Mad Max Fury Road count as a reboot? Because I would consider that a success.
It's a soft reboot because it functions as a reboot, but it's a continuation. It fits into the mythology of the before, but it's not like any sort of way like a full reboot or anything like that. He's playing the same Mad Max.
Yeah, I mean I guess it's a soft reboot in the sense that it's a new actor playing the character. But again, kind of similar to like Indiana Jones and like James Bond, like you can swap out the person playing Max and that's fine. Because really those films aren't even about Max. They're just anthology films and he just happens to be like the person kind of wandering in and just discovering whatever the heck is going on. But yeah, I mean, given the nature of the series, no, it's not a soft reboot. It's the 4th film in the franchise. It's not a reboot. It's the 4th sequel. Sorry, 3rd sequel, 4th film in the franchise.
So confusing when you have to like break it down.
Yeah.
We got another comment from Hollywood saying, do you think a third Zombieland film would be a good idea, and would it be one of the great horror comedy trilogies? I feel like people didn't really like the second one, right?
No, yeah.
I don't think that we even needed that one. I think the idea was interesting to be like, 10 years later they're all gonna, or 20 or 10? However many years later, they came back together, the same cast, but I don't think it really worked.
I mean, I didn't even really like the first one, if I'm being honest. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion. It just didn't. The humor didn't really land for me. So like, yeah. And then the second one, I was just like, okay, cool.
I mean, I enjoyed the second one. I enjoyed the first one, but not in a, oh man, I love this. It's just not one of those ones that feels like it's positioned to be set up as one of the greats of all time. Yeah. I mean, the fun thing about the second one for me is I watched it at the press screening in California. And I accidentally snuck our buddy Tyler into it. I was specifically told I couldn't bring a guest in, and then we were at this screening, and he was going to like walk home or something like that. I don't know what he was going to do, and then he just like walked in with me, and they went for it. Yeah. And so it's just kind of a fun little memory, but it's just not set up to be one of the greats because it doesn't have that reputation.
Yeah.
Aaron Play says, The Devil All the Time with Tom Holland seems interesting, and is that an original film? No, that's actually a book.
Yeah.
So another adaptation.
Right, but it's also not, like, it's not a franchise movie. That's like it's very much like an indie drama or prestige picture that Netflix is putting out. That's not a franchise movie.
We have another question from Colin. Can we talk about the X-Men franchise? Is there a more up and down franchise than that one? Crazy the amount of continuity problems.
Yeah.
I think X-Men's more of just like, they've done a lot of different things with X-Men. I feel like you can like separate it into like different eras, kind of.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way of putting it. Is there's like the original stuff, which was botched by 3 in Origins. Although, I mean, Origins is not even like, I don't even...
It's like its own era entirely because they were going to do like a Magneto movie and stuff, but then that kind of morphed into First Class. And but yeah, it's like a product of its place in comic book movie history, which is to say it kind of kicked off this era of comic book movies. So it was years before the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so after they'd completed their trilogy, then the MCU comes out and they're like, hey, what if we started bringing some of this stuff back? And it's just weird.
Yeah, it's like, you're right. And so, you separate it into like the original trilogy, the First Class trilogy, and then like the Wolverine movies.
And they wanted to have a shared universe, big continuity, but it was never set up to be that. No. And they never seemed particularly concerned about it. So very quickly, they're like, hey, look, here's Sabretooth. Like, wait, Sabretooth was already in the first X-Men movie.
That is so weird.
This is a totally different character. Totally different characterization. And you, like, casually killed off Sabretooth in X-Men. Now you're acting as if they're brothers. So when he died in X-Men, they'd known each other for 150 years. And you're not even trying to tie this together, but that's clearly Hugh Jackman.
Now, I'm curious, what are you guys thinking about Marvel getting the X-Men?
I don't know. I don't really have too many thoughts. I just want them to, give us a fresh new take on it. One that's obviously a little more consistent. I don't think that it necessarily needs to be intertwined with the MCU like 24/7. I feel like they can sort of do their own thing, and then characters can pop up here and there. But the thing I really liked about like the first 2 X-Men movies especially is that they got to the heart of the characters and sort of tried to tackle like more topical issues and whatnot, especially the first part of that first X-Men movie, where they're all sort of figuring out and like the government's sort of starting to crack down on them and limit their freedoms and rights and stuff like that. Like that, I mean, the X-Men is a giant allegory for the civil rights movement, and so like I feel like they kind of honed in on that in those first two movies, and then they kind of lost track of it. There was a little bit of it in Days of Future Past and First Class for sure, but like those first two films really kind of tap into it on a different level, and so like I don't want that to be lost in the MCU interpretation of it. So yeah, but I just want it to be good.
I gotta say, I'm hoping that they eventually do AVX. I don't know if you guys read those comic books, but where they had like Avengers versus X-Men.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
Really cool if they like eventually, like later on, led up to that. I think it'd probably be different people than we have now.
Yeah.
Just because a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe characters have been there for so long, but like maybe like the newer ones versus like whatever new X-Men people they have. Like that was, I remember like a crazy huge time in like the comic book.
Yeah, I remember.
World.
Yeah,
I loved those. So
yeah, I mean, it's like a cool event comic. If they can write it into, the MCU or whatever in a way that doesn't seem like ridiculous, then yeah, I'm all for it because that could be fun. Yeah.
Well, I think for me with X-Men, I'm just excited about getting back to someone having the ability to just tell a normal classic X-Men story, because they didn't set up to have a 20-year-long franchise. They played out normal X-Men 15 years ago. And so then it's like, let's do an origin for Wolverine, and let's do a story set in the 1960s, and then let's do time travel where we have both of them. But like just a classic lineup of X-Men characters without all these constraints and stuff. We haven't had that. And so I just want a normal X-Men story without any of the limitations that they had with the Fox franchise since like 2006.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Let's keep going. Average says, a couple months ago I watched Jaws in the theater and it was awesome. I think that's always fun when you like are able to see an older film in theaters. I remember for Back to the Future Day in 2015, I went and saw the second movie in theaters, and that was the first time I'd seen it like around people, and it was such a different experience to have like that energy of just like other people who were fans.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun. Colin says, let's be real, Fast and the Furious is the best franchise of all time, and every movie is a 10 out of 10. You guys fans of the Fast and the Furious? They're an interesting one, but they've done so many movies and now a spin-off.
Yeah. I mean, they're fine. I didn't think they started getting good until Fast 5 again. Yeah. Sort of like that's really the proper starting point. So, but they're enjoyable. It's just like kind of mindless entertainment.
Yeah.
Very self-aware though. I think that's the thing. They're stupid, but they also know that they're stupid, and that's like the appeal.
We'll do a couple more and then we'll wrap up. Kieran says, I think that if Mockingjay wasn't split into two parts, The Hunger Games would be in the conversations of the best franchises and trilogies of all time for more often. I think the last movie wasn't really that good, to be honest. So maybe then, since that's the one they split, maybe it would have been better.
Yeah. I think people struggled with the third book. So I don't know if it necessarily would have been one of the best, just because the original source material like was not well received.
Mm-hmm. Let's do a few. Aaron says, I can't believe there's like 6 Step Up movies. I've only seen one of them, but there's like there's 6 of those. Yeah, there's a lot of surprising movies.
Yeah.
Swan Princess, there's like 6 or 7 of those.
Yep.
Who knew? Who knew?
It's
I
ridiculous.
did, and they've been watched in my home before.
I knew there were at least 2, but I didn't realize there was so many more.
Yeah.
I think we're getting some other questions outside of franchise ones as well. Karen says, have you guys seen the new film I'm Thinking of Ending Things? What did you think, and how much would you recommend it? Did you guys check it out?
No.
Yeah, I loved it. It's not going to be for everyone. I think more people are going to dislike it than like it, but I thought it was just really just wacky and out there. Really made you think. Like, if people are confused by Tenet, like, just wait till they see this movie. Like, this is far more confusing than Tenet.
This was a movie that I was like, I literally don't know what happened. Like,
Yeah,
what happened?
No, I know. It's like one of those ones where it's like you really have to talk about it afterwards, and
Yeah.
that's where it like started to like. That's when I realized, oh, okay, maybe I did pick up on more than I thought I did. But the whole thing starts to come together, once you kind of like talk it through.
Yeah.
But it's so good. I mean, it's rich with just subtext, and I think it's one that I can't wait to dive back into.
Yeah, I've been talking about it a lot with Impression Blend and Steph.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we're just like constantly trying to figure out like, okay, what did this mean? What about this? What did you think of this? And it's like we all have different theories. But for me, I felt like it was one of those films that like I don't know if I actually liked it, but there's some films that even if I don't know if I like it, I still enjoy the trying to figure it out situation. And this is one of those ones where it's like you're really trying to figure it out, like every little detail from their clothes changing to like names and the color of the wallpaper and different things like that, where you're like, what? Why does everything mean something? This is crazy.
Yeah. Oh no, it is. It's wild for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we're at the end of some questions here. We'll do one more. What's a really good one? The last one. Let's see. Well, this is a lovely comment. Let's do this one. This was a great topic of conversation today. Loved hearing all of your guys' opinions and about everything, and about how everything is a reboot, remake, and original ideas are dead, sadly. Love the insight from everyone. Kudos.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Very nice.
A nice comment to end on.
Very sweet.
And if we didn't get to your comments, feel free to, leave them under the video, and we'll go back and I'll reply to a bunch, or if you guys feel free. Thank you guys for spending 2 hours with me. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time, but this was really fun, a great discussion. And I hope to have you guys on again soon to chat about some more pop culture topics.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a fun time.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right, we're going to end the broadcast. Bye.
Bye.